We spend a lot of time on this show talking about um, the absolute worst case scenarios.
Right.
We talk about the disasters, active shooters, the massive wildfires. And I think usually when we picture those things going wrong, we picture a lack of stuff.
Right. Not enough water hoses, not enough police cars, not enough time.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into a stack of reports. And this includes a major critical incident review from the DOJ on Uvalde, some heavy technical research from NIST, and FEMA guidance that all point to a much more insidious culprit, one that is almost always part of the story when things go sideways.
And it isn't what you'd think. It isn't just a dead battery or, a broken radio tower.
No, it's communication.
Oh.
But specifically how communication failures are actually failures of command, of coordination, and assumptions. We are sort of looking at Chapter 6 today, which is a synthesis of all these failures.
Yeah.
And it starts with a really sobering reality check. When major incidents go wrong, communication isn't just a side effect. It's often the central failure point.
It really is. And I think the massive misconception, like you hinted at, is that we think communication failure is a technical glitch. Like, can you hear me now?
Right.
But the sources we're looking at today, they argue that communication is the lifeline of integration. And if that line snaps, it doesn't matter how many resources you have on scene, the whole response stalls.
So here's the mission for this deep dive. We need to answer a really frustrating paradox.
Yeah.
We live in an age where we have more data than ever.
Oh, absolutely.
We have digital floor plans, drone feeds, body cams, instant messaging. So why is it that first responders often end up knowing less about what's happening inside a building than, say, the people watching it unfold on Twitter?
That is the big question. The paradox of more data, less clarity. And to answer it, I think we have to look at how we got here.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source material draws this really sharp contrast between the good old days and now. And I'm definitely putting good old days in air quotes there.
Sure. It wasn't perfect, but it was.
The text says 20 years ago, a cop or a firefighter had basically two things, a radio and a map book.
Yeah.
Those thick, spiral-bound Thomas guides tucked beside the seat.
I remember them well. And the incident commander, the person in charge, was usually standing in a parking lot with a clipboard. They couldn't see much inside the building or the disaster zone.
Right.
But, and here's the key, expectations matched those limits. Everyone knew they were operating with partial info, so they had to rely really heavily on voice communication to paint the picture for each other.
Exactly. But now, flash forward to today. Responders are absolutely drowning in information. The source mentions hazmat data, sensors, detailed blueprints available instantly on a tablet.
Right.
But here's the catch. More information doesn't automatically mean better communication. In fact, a lot of that time it means the opposite.
Right, because we've created what the tech industry calls walled gardens.
There's this great illustrative example in the text about a warehouse fire. I think this perfectly captures the modern problem.
I agree.
I want to walk through this because it feels like something that could happen anywhere.
It really does. So imagine you have a massive warehouse fire. It's too big for one town's fire department, so you have 3 different departments responding. It's called mutual aid.
Okay, so Department A, Department B, and Department C all roll up, and they all have these high-tech command screens. They've spent millions on this stuff.
You'd think this would be perfect, but Department A looks at their screen and sees the GPS location of their own truck, Engine 12.
Okay.
Department D and C. They look at their screens, and they don't see Engine 12 at all. Their systems don't talk to Department A's system.
So they're literally looking at 3 different versions of reality.
It gets worse. Department B actually has the digital layout of the building inside their system. They know where the hazardous materials are stored.
Oh, that's critical.
Critical. But Department C is the one sending crews into the smoke-filled hallways. And Department C is searching blind because that data is locked inside Department B's server.
That is terrifying.
It is. They are fighting 3 different versions of the same fire, and the source calls this a failure of interoperability. It's not that the data doesn't exist, it's that it's stuck in a silo.
It reminds me of the Tower of Babel story. I mean, everyone is shouting, but no one understands each other. Is this just because they bought different brands of tablets?
That's a big part of it. The text gets into the technical side. There are standards like the Emergency Data Exchange Language, or EDXL.
EDXL?
Yeah, think of it as a universal dictionary that lets, say, a Motorola system translate data for a Kenwood system.
So the dictionary exists.
It exists. But a lot of vendors don't use it or they implement it poorly. They want to lock agencies into their ecosystem.
Yeah.
So you end up with one agency speaking English, one speaking Spanish, one speaking Mandarin. They're shouting valuable information, but nothing lands.
So we have all this shiny tech, but if it doesn't connect, it's just expensive noise. But let's hit something even scarier. What happens when the infrastructure itself, the stuff carrying that noise, just gives up?
This is the silent threat. This is what keeps emergency managers awake at night. The reliance on things they just don't control.
There's a stat in the CISA and SafeTime report that honestly shocked me. It says 58% of public safety agencies have faced disruptions caused by equipment they do not own or manage.
That is a massive vulnerability. We tend to think 911 centers are these fortresses that control their own destiny, but they rely on what we call the backhaul.
The backhaul.
Yeah, the physical connection fiber optic cables, microwave links that connects the radio tower to the dispatch center. And usually that backhaul is owned by a commercial internet provider.
The same people who sell you home Wi-Fi.
Exactly. And when those private vendors have a bad day, public safety has a bad day. There was an anecdote from 2017 in the source that blew my mind. A major carrier pushed a routine software update, not a cyber attack, just an update.
And it caused 12,000 911 calls to fail over a 5-hour period.
12,000 because of a software update glitch.
Unbelievable.
It just shows you how fragile the chain is. And then you have the physical disasters. I mean, look at Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. The report notes that 95% of cell towers failed.
95%. That's a total blackout.
So all that high-tech coordination, gone. The FEMA teams had to go back to what they call analog resilience.
Which
Paper runners, literally sending people in cars to deliver messages.
Oh, okay.
And physical laminated maps.
There was also a mention of a 2019 cloud outage where agencies lost their computer-aided dispatch, their CAD systems, and their records because of a misconfiguration at a private vendor. Just click. Gone.
And this brings us to a crucial point the source makes about resilience. Resilience isn't just buying a better radio, it's having a backup for the backup.
Right.
And sometimes that backup is a satellite phone, sometimes it's a mesh network,
Yeah.
and honestly, sometimes it is a laminated paper map.
Yeah, the text explicitly says paper maps are not outdated. They are insurance.
Exactly. If the cloud goes dark, you still need to know where the streets are. If you can't navigate your own city without Google Maps, you aren't resilient.
I want to move us to the most significant case study in this material, and I want to be really clear with our listeners here. We are talking about the May 2022 shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas.
Yes.
The DOJ critical incident review is very detailed. And we are not here to relitigate the tactical movements of the SWAT teams or the specific decisions to breach or not breach. We are strictly looking at the communication breakdown described in Chapter 6 and how that breakdown fueled the tragedy.
Right. And the source makes a really important distinction between internal failure, so what the cops knew, and external failure, what the families knew.
Let's start with internal, the fog of war. The source says the incident commander on the scene did not receive information that 911 calls were coming from inside the classrooms.
That is a critical failure point. The report says there were children calling 911 from rooms 101 and 112. We know this now. The dispatchers knew it then.
But the commander didn't know.
He didn't know. Why? Because he hadn't established a way to get updates from the outside dispatch. He was operating on the assumption that the subject was barricaded and the threat was contained.
And that's a huge distinction. If it's a barricaded subject, you wait for negotiators. If it's an active shooter, you breach immediately.
Exactly. The lack of information literally dictated the wrong tactical doctrine. He was making decisions based on false assumptions because the information pipeline was broken.
And it wasn't just dispatch. The report notes that radios didn't work effectively inside the building. The walls were thick concrete.
Right.
And worse, no one was assigned to fix the link. There was no one acting as a human bridge between the officers on the north side of the school and the south side. They were totally isolated.
So you have isolation inside, but then you have the external failure. And reading this part of the DOJ report it's just heartbreaking. The chaos for the families outside.
The external failure here, it refers to the public trust. The DOJ found that inaccurate information wasn't just leaked, it was officially shared.
It creates a breakdown in reality.
There's a specific detail that just stood out. More than 30 minutes after the shooting began, a social media post went out stating that all students were safe.
Which was completely inaccurate. Imagine being a parent, seeing that official post, exhaling, and then finding out later.
And it didn't stop there. You had the school district police and the Uvalde police posting contradictory information about where parents should go for reunification.
Right.
One says go to the high school, the other says go to the civic center.
It just creates panic. And the source highlights a concept called the all clear. Even after the shooter was killed, there was no clear public statement confirming the threat was over.
So the families were just left terrified.
Right. The threat had ended physically, but psychologically the crisis continued because communication didn't close the loop, and rumors filled that void.
That brings us directly to the role of social media. The source describes it as a double-edged sword. Or, as the text puts it, it can be a hero or a villain.
It's a vacuum filler. I mean, if official sources don't speak, social media will fill the silence instantly.
We saw the good side in the Baton Rouge floods, the Cajun Navy. People used hashtags to organize boat rescues when 9/11 was completely overwhelmed. That's incredible.
It is. It's decentralized. It's efficient. But then you look at the Oroville Dam emergency in California. Rumors spread on social media that the dam had already failed. It hadn't.
But people panicked.
They panicked. They clogged evacuation routes based on bad information.
So how do you fix that? If you're a government agency, how do you compete with the speed of Twitter?
The solution the text proposes is the Joint Information System, or JIS.
Okay, unpack that. Is that just PR?
No, and that is the mistake people make. It's not just public relations, it's an operational structure. The goal of a JIS is to create a single source of truth.
A single source of truth. How does that work practically?
It means multiple agencies. Police, fire, the school district, the city. They all get in a room, physical or virtual. They agree on the facts, they agree on the message, and then they release it together.
So they have to be singing from the same song sheet.
Exactly. You don't have the fire chief tweeting one thing and the school superintendent tweeting another.
And looking back at Uvalde, the DOJ found that no lead agency took charge of the messaging. There was no JIS. And that fragmentation caused real harm.
It did.
It's interesting because we often think of technology as the solution, if we just had better radios or if we just had a better app. But the source material seems to suggest that the biggest barrier isn't tech. It's us.
It's the human element, the ego and turf.
There's a mention of the San Bernardino shooting in 2015. This was the famous standoff between the FBI and Apple over the shooter's iPhone.
Right, and that tension there, it captures the whole dilemma. We need access to data for safety to know if there's a second shooter or a planted bomb, but we need encryption for privacy.
And the source points out that when security is too tight, investigations stall. When it's too loose, privacy erodes. It's a balance.
But even beyond privacy, there's the issue of agencies just not wanting to share. This idea of, this is my data, you can't see it.
Which is where the NCRNet success story comes in. This was in the National Capital Region.
Yeah, this is a great example of getting it right. They realized they couldn't force every police department and fire station in the DC area to buy the same software. That's just impossible.
Too expensive? Too political?
Right. So instead, they built a system of systems. They built a digital translator that kind of sits in the middle.
And why did that work where others failed?
Because leadership accepted the complexity. They didn't try to flatten it. They built trust before the crisis.
That phrase, trust before technology, comes up again with the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust.
Exactly. Agencies there, schools, juvenile justice, foster care, they only agreed to share sensitive data once they trusted the people on the other end. It wasn't about the software, it was about the handshake. They spent 2 years on legal agreements before they wrote a single line of code.
It really seems like whether we're talking about a warehouse fire, a hurricane, or an active shooter, the lesson is surprisingly consistent.
It is.
The shiny tools don't matter if the humans haven't agreed on how to talk to each other first.
That's the bottom line. Communication is a leadership responsibility. It's not a ticket you submit to IT support. You have to plan for failure. You have to assume the cell tower will fall. You have to assume the cloud will go dark.
What if you don't have a plan for that? You don't really have a plan.
You have a wish, and wishes do not work in emergencies.
There is one final thought from the source material that I really want to leave everyone with. It's about the aftermath. The text says, communication continues after the threat is gone.
This is so profound. In Uvalde, the trauma was deepened because families learned the details of their children's deaths from the media rather than from officials. They were left in the dark even after the police tape was up.
So the question for you listening, whether you run a school, a business, or a city, is this. In your own organization, do you know who holds the pen when the crisis hits? Do you know who is responsible for the message? Or are you just assuming the Wi-Fi will work and someone else will figure it out?
Because when the line goes dead, assumptions are the only thing left. And as we've seen, bad assumptions can be fatal.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Stay safe.